Hello and welcome back to part 5 of our Brothers War Limited set review. Today we'll be going over the black commons and uncommons. If you haven't already seen our earlier parts, please check out the link to the video up above me over here and see how we do the grades and our approach. But with that, we'll start off with Ashnod's Intervention. For 1 black mana, you get a instant with until end of turn. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains when this creature dies or is put into exile from the battlefield. Return it to its owner's hand. So this is a form of removal and bounce, and I kind of like it as filler. Again, the bouncing piece is helpful for anything that enters the battlefield, as well as for the prototype cards, where you might play them early, but then later on be able to get them back and play them as their more threatening non-prototype side. So with that, I like this as a good filler. I think this is a D+. Up next, we have Disfigure. For 1 black mana, you get an instant with target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Simple, but good. This is a removal for small things, efficient, C+. Up next, we have Emergency Weld. For 1 black, you get a sorcery with return target creature or artifact or creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact token. So this is drawing your best graveyard permanent and affecting the board with a 1/1. Doing that for 2 is pretty good. Usually I like these effects to cost 1, but it does give you a good amount for 2, so I'll give this a C. I think this is a solid playable. Up next, we have Giction Infiltrator. For 1 black, you get a 2/1 Phyrexian human creature. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Giction Infiltrator. This is a filler for 2 drops. If you need a 2-drop, you'll play it. There is a sacrifice theme going on, so there is opportunity to pump this up. It's nice that it pumps on sacrifice, but that's not... it's not a trigger that I would do extremely often. I like my triggers to be easier to pull off, like playing a spell or something, than having to sacrifice something. So I think this is just filler. I think this is a D. Up next, we have Power Stone Fracture. For 1 black, you get a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy target creature or planeswalker. This is very efficient. It sucks that you need to sacrifice something like a Power Stone in order to get it to happen, but it is efficient removal nonetheless, and it hits everything, including Planeswalkers. So I think this is powerful. It's not a pull in the black, but I think this is a C+. Up next, we have Thraxodemon. For 1 black, you get a 2/2 demon creature. Pay 3, tap it, sacrifice another creature or artifact, you draw a card. A 2/2 for 2 is a fine rate to begin with, and having a sacrifice outlet that lets you draw cards, especially with the amount of Power Stones that are going to be floating around in this set, I think turning those into cards is good. It does cost a lot for you to activate that, so this is just a playable, but I think this is a solid playable. I give this a C. Up next, we have Carrion Locust. For 2 black, you get a 2/1 insect horror creature with flying. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card from opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, that player loses a life. So this is not a great rate, but it can remove an Unearth spell. So with that, this becomes better than just filler. A 2 power flyer for 3 is okay. I think this is about a D+. I may, this is bordering on C-, but in general, I'm not really looking to play this as anything more than filler. Up next, we have Gixxion Skullflayer. For 2 black, you get a 2/3 Phyrexian human assassin creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is a fine rate for something that can grow. 2/3 for 3 is fine, nothing special, but especially in black, you'll be sacrificing things and expecting to have more creatures in your graveyard. So this can grow over time. I think this is a playable. I think it's on the low end of your playables, but a C-. cards that cost 3, give you a Power Stone token are interesting. I think this is one of the worst ones of them. I liked the blue one we visited better. I'd rather get card advantage while I'm doing this than selecting a particular card from my opponent and having them discard it. It's, in my mind, just filler. I'd rather my Power Stones come into play with a permanent or be more incidental than cost me a card to be able to get there. So I'm going to give this a D as filler. Up next, we have Killzone Acrobat. For 2 and a black, you get a 3/2 human soldier creature. When Killzone Acrobat attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, it gains flying until end of turn. This is a decent rate sacrifice outlet that can have evasion for the later game. Black looks like it's going to want to be, kind of like the black-red sacrifice with a little bit of aggro. So this is a decent rate. I think this is a solid playable you'll want. I think this is a C. Up next, Moment of Defiance. For 2 and a black, you get a instant with target creature gets +2/+1 and gains lifelink until end of turn, and you draw a card. It's nice that it cantrips, but I would like to have more impact out of this card on the board for 3 mana. Once you get up into 3 mana, you're exiting more of what I want as tricks, and you're getting more into I want to make sure that it impacts the board. In a way, it somewhat can by acting like a removal spell possibly, but you'd have to time that pretty right without your creatures getting removed. Lifelink is a nice add-on to buy you some time, but I don't think it's enough to really pull this into anything more than like a C. Was a grade that I gave it here. I'm kind of thinking that's on the lower end of that, though, maybe even a C-. Up next, we have Ravenous Giggle. If that loads. There we go. For 4 mana, 3 and a black, you get a 2/3 Mole Horror creature. When Ravenous Giggle enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. You may put a creature card from among the cards built this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Alright, so this is either a 2/3 draw card for 4 or a 3/4 for 4, and you kind of get your choice between that. That's pretty good. It's somewhat bad when it whiffs, but it's not horrible, and it's pretty good when it hits its card. I put this at a C. I can kind of see myself coming up on this one. I'm kind of more stretching into C+, as the worst case is a 3/4 for 4. So yeah, I'm going to change my grade to a C+ here. I think I might have given it a C just because it's 4 mana and we're starting out the higher end of things. But it's a decent 4 mana card. Up next, we have Overwhelming Remorse. For 4 and a black. You get an instant with this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. Exile target creature or planeswalker. So this is pretty much good all around except for in the early game, right? In the early game, it's not a removal, so that's a big drawback on it. Otherwise, this card would be a B or above if it could also impact the early game somehow. But in the late game, I'm expecting this to be cheap removal and very good at it. Not only can you hit any creature or planeswalker, you get to exile them, so you don't get like an Unearth advantage, or your opponent doesn't get Unearth out of this. So I like this card a lot. I think this is a B-. It pulls me into black. Up next, we have the last of our commons. We have a 4/5 Trench Stalker for 4 and a black. It's a Beast Horror creature. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, Trench Stalker has Death Touch and lifelink. In general, I'm not a huge fan of this card, as it's basically a 4/5 for 5, but that's not horrible. And when you have the archetype of the draw 2 cards a turn, this can be quite deadly. So I'm going to give this a synergy grade, kind of like our last couple commons ago. We had a base rate is slightly under rate, but it can be very good. This is that case. The last one I did not give synergy because it's not revolving around a particular deck. This one does. So I'm going to give this a synergy C+. When you can activate Death Touch and Lifelink, it'll be a bit of a house to deal with. So synergy C+. Moving into the uncommons. First up, we have Dreams of Steel and Oil for a black. You get a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an artifact or creature card from it. Then choose an artifact or creature card from their graveyard. Exile the chosen cards. So first of all, notice the wording here. You're not targeting the artifact or creature in either case, so it doesn't fizzle out if the target becomes illegal. But this is good early in the game as you snatch a card. It's good middle game because you might be able to 2-for-1 in a way with getting their card and getting the Unearth card out of the graveyard. In late game, it could possibly get a card. It's a little worse then, but it at least should be able to get an Unearth in that case. So this is good all the way around. With all that, I'm going to give this a B. It's a pretty good rate for what you get. That might be a little bit high, down to, say, like a B- possibly. Yeah, just I'm changing my grades a lot here, but going through the set kind of again here, I think it's a little bit lower. So we're going to go with a B- here, but I do think this will be a good card that you want. Up next, we have Gnawing Vermin. For 1 black, you get a 1/1 rat creature. When Gnawing Vermin enters the battlefield, target player mills 2 cards. When Gnawing Vermin dies, target creature you don't control gets -1/-1 until end of turn. The best thing I can say about this is it's a fine rate for a 1/1. It can fuel your Unearth. When it dies, it has a good ability. That's all good for 1 mana. But small creatures like this generally are not worth a card in Limited. And I think you're going to want to get your cards elsewhere than this. So it is fine sack fodder, but I think you can do better. I think this is a D+. Up next, we have Go for the Throat. 1 and a black. Instant. Destroy target non-artifact creature. I like the play here. Go for the Throat. Well, you can if they're an artifact, right? This is a good card. Best one we've seen so far in black. I was gonna say maybe even as good as anything that we had seen in blue so far. But I think this one's a B. Having a 2 mana destroy almost anything. The drawback being non-artifact is fine. This is a B. It's pulling me into black for sure. Up next, we have Thran Vigil for 1 and a black. It's an enchantment. Whenever 1 or more artifact and or creature cards leave your graveyard during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This engine could be very good in the right aggressive Unearth deck. There's other things that can trigger it besides Unearth, which I think is important because just Unearth alone wouldn't trigger this too often. Other than in those Unearth decks, though, where you have a bunch of Unearth and some other things that might pull things out of your graveyard, I'm not a huge fan of it otherwise. It does cost a card itself, and it needs to hit 3 times before it's good. So with all that, I'm going to give it a synergy grade. I think this is a synergy C+. But if you can get this going, it does add up and will be good. Up next, we have Battlefield Butcher. For 2 and a black, you get a 1/4 human soldier creature. It has pay 5, tap it, each opponent loses 2 life. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each creature card in your graveyard. Now this is interesting. It will close out a lot of games and is a slight draw into black. I'll give this a B-. This sits here as a good defending house for a while, and then as the game goes on, you can just deal 2 damage every single turn to your opponent, hopefully fairly cheaply. B- it is. Up next, Gruesome Realization. For 1 black, you get a sorcery with choose 1. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life, or creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Neither sides are all that great. I want more for them, but I do think the modality on this one makes it playable. you'll want to do, you'll have an option to make this not a dead card no matter what, right? So with that, I'm going to give this a C-. I think it's in the playable category. It's not something I want to pick up highly, but C- it is. Up next, Gurgling Anointer. For 2 and a black, you get a 1/3 Phyrexian horror creature with flying. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, return another creature card with mana value less than or equal to its power from your graveyard to the battlefield. Alright, so it replaces itself as long as the power is high enough. So if you're in the draw a second card archetype, this becomes a bit of a pull into it. I give this a Synergy B-. Could be considered a Synergy B if you are enough into that Synergy. You'll love this in that archetype, and otherwise you're not going to love it. So Synergy B- it is. Up next, No One Left Behind. 4 and a black for sorcery. With this spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a creature card with mana value 3 or less. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is one of the best versions of this card that we've seen. This whole return something to the battlefield for 5 mana or so. It can be cast cheap, so if you need to impact the board early, you can do this on the cheap end. When you do it late, it's good then too, especially since there are going to be so many prototype cards that have high converted mana cost values, like 8 through 10, that you'll be able to target with this and get that right onto the battlefield. So you're going to want this card. I think this is a good pull into B. It's not quite the 2-for-1 that is going to make me pull it to like a B+, but this is a B, and I won't go lower. Up next, we have Corrupt. For 5 and a black, it's a sorcery. Corrupt deals damage to any target equal to the number of swamps you control. You gain life equal to the damage dealt that way. And you'll only want to run this if you're mono black. There's a bit of a mono-colored theme to this set, given the amount of artifacts that are also in colorless stuff that is there, that you can get away with it. And I think this is a Synergy C+. The effect itself is not that great, but if you have enough swamps, draining them for an amount of life equal to those swamps can be good. Synergy C+, and you'll want to play it if you're mono black. Then we have Disciples of Gixx. For 4 black, you get a 4/4 Phyrexian human creature. When Disciples of Gixx enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 3 artifact cards, put them into your graveyard, then shuffle. Alright, now we're getting to the, in a way, 4-for-1 kind of. I wouldn't quite go that far, but this is a 4/4 for 6, which is definitely underrated, but the fact that it can put 3 artifact cards that would likely have Unearth on them into your graveyard, or can fuel your other graveyard things, this simply is card advantage. This makes the pull into the B+ side of things. This is the best card I think we've seen so far in black. And B+ is my grade. That's all for the black commons and uncommons. Stay tuned next time. We'll go over the red next. See you then.